Yeah, the nation's 220 some odd years old, and they grew the money supply by 40%. And then the guy who was in charge of that growth, Powell, said inflation is transitory. And then when it became clear that it wasn't, and they had a 9%, annualized inflation rate at a conference, at an elite monetary conference in Jackson Hole, he joked and said, "Oh yeah, the good ship inflationary has sailed." He joked about it as though, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of sorry I screwed up, but no big deal." Right? Yeah. Well, fine, no big deal to him because he's worth $100 million. But how about the rest of us that have to struggle to get by? And it's absolutely criminal what these people have done to us. And my book lays that out.
Hello. Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, broadcasting from Phoenix, Arizona, where it's either heaven or hell, and it's just about to turn to hell. Right now, it's pretty pleasant, though. And I'm very excited today. Our guest is Lawrence Lepard. And the reason I say that is, for those who have followed me, I'm a fanatic on this subject called money. This is the creature from Jekyll Island. You can see I study like an idiot. And this is my book, Prophecy. But Lawrence, this is the book that turned me on. It was called The Grunch of Giants by Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller. And sure. This book, The Grunch, is your chapter 1. You nailed. I mean, this book was written in 84 or something like that, whatever, 74. Yeah. And I was a student of his for 3 years. And
you were lucky.
He's one of the greatest geniuses of our times, and he's a futurist. And he wrote Grunch of Giants, and Grunch stands for Gross Universal Cash Ice. So when I read your book here, The Big Print, this book, back 30, 40, 50 years ago now, is your chapter 1.
Well, that guy's a genius. Yeah, no, I knew of him, and there were some other books he wrote, but I haven't read his work, but I've known of him through various people, and he is a genius. You were lucky to study under him.
I've been very blessed. And but the greatest part about my life right now, I get to talk to guys like you. So I'm thrilled.
I feel the same way. As you know, Rich Dad changed my life. So I'm honored.
I'm honored. I am very honored. So you and I are going to travel the world, and we're going to spread the gospel, because I was saying to Lawrence that I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I don't hand out the Bible. I hand out the big print now. And I said, you guys got to read this book.
Yeah, thank you. It's very kind.
So tell us about basically your background and how it morphed into the big print. And most importantly, what's your concern?
Well, so my concern is that society has gone down the wrong path by following the Keynesian monetary model. And it's created all the difficulty that we have in society today. The wealth inequality, the unfairness, the inflation, the wars, just a lot of the bad things that have happened. And in spite of all the great things that have happened in technology that allow, guys like you and I to talk to each other halfway across the country and broadcast to thousands of people, those are all the great advantages. We're still operating with a government and a monetary operating system that is better suited to the 18th century or the 19th century. And I wrote the book, Robert, because I found myself sitting around looking at the country and watching, I think it was sometime early last year, watching Team Red debate Team Blue. And they were arguing about a lot of things that in my mind didn't really matter. And the metaphor I used is, the house was on fire and they were arguing over the color of the drapes. And, I thought the house was on fire because the monetary system is what's really the problem and what's broken. And that's an area that I happen to know something about. I never envisioned myself being an author or writing a book. I just kind of pursued my craft, which has always been investing, which is why your book resonated with me. And but in doing so, I obviously learned a lot, and I studied a lot, and I studied Keynesianism. I studied Austrian economics. I read all the greats. Hayek, von Mises, I followed all the great investors, Buffett, et cetera, and just trying to be the best investor I could be. And that was, I always thought that was my highest and best use. I as a kid, I just enjoyed figuring stuff out. I used to take things apart and put them back together again, and probably would have been an engineer if I wasn't an investment manager. So, when I saw what was going wrong with the country, I kind of came to the conclusion, and I felt like I had a clear view of what the reason was, and the reason being the monetary system. I thought, somebody's got to write this down. And then I looked around, and there were some pretty good books out there that did do it. I mean, you've written books, Rickards has written books, lots of people have written books, but I thought, well, in the Bitcoin areas, there have been some good books written, but they were kind of esoteric. I thought, but somebody's got to really write it down in a way that's really simple that everyone can understand. That it's not lightweight, that gets into the details, but that makes it really clear and understandable. So that because the average American doesn't really spend a lot of time thinking about the monetary system or the Federal Reserve, and they're not going to really wade through The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is a fabulous book, but it's just too much for the average person to read. And so, yeah, a brilliant book, and an inspiration for me. And I took a lot of things out of it and put them in my book. And in fact, I borrowed from a ton of people. And so, there's some have accused me there's no original thought in your book, which I disagree with. I think I brought it together in a way that, adds something of value. But, what I thought I could do that was of original value was I could pull the highlights of all these different thoughts together in a way that a very average person, and I'm not looking down on them, but I mean, just, somebody who's not familiar with finance could read it and go, oh, I get it. I understand what they're doing to me. I understand why the system's broken. I understand why it's unfair. I understand why the rich guys are getting richer and I'm struggling to just get by. And so I really wanted to put that into very clear prose that anyone could understand.
Right.
And then, of course, and that's the depressing part. That's the book is, as you know, is broken into two parts. The problem, which goes into the history and explains what happened. And then the bright part, which is the solution. This isn't all gloom and doom, folks. In fact, there's a way out of it. There's a way you can protect yourself. There's a way that we can all change the system for the better. And as we do, and we return to a sound monetary system, we're going to have a really fantastic world. And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm not trying to sell books as much as I want my kids who are in their 20s and one's just turned 30. I want them to grow up in a world that's better, more like the world I grew up in, where there was a middle class and more fairness. And with the exception of the 70s, there wasn't terrible inflation. So that's kind of the genesis of the book, Robert. And I just tried to do it as best I could. And, hopefully it works. I mean, the test will be if it does.
Well, let me explain what happened this morning, because I do book studies, and I've done them for like 500 people. We all get together, we read one book, and we discuss the book, and I learned it in Bible class. They sit there and read the Bible and study. So that's a good way to do it, Yeah. I'm not really religious, and I'm not pressing that, but it was a good way to study, because you could talk to different people, what you could pick up here, and different points of view. Yeah. So this morning was the first time we did your first 3 chapters of this book here. And there was about 20 of us. They're just raving about it, saying it's so crystal clear. It's simple. But he's also saying what this guy said here at Grunch of Giants, what Bucky said, Fuller, your wealth is being stolen via your money.
Yeah.
In other words, so we bust our asses, we work hard to go to school, get a job and all this, but the rich get richer and the poor get poorer because our wealth, our money is the thief. It's pretty simple.
It's a very sophisticated fraud that they've set up, and they gaslight us. I always cringe when I hear Jerome Powell saying he's doing what's best for the American people. And I know that, no, you're doing what's best for the bankers and the financial actors and not for the rest of us. The rest of us have to go to the grocery store and watch what we can buy with a fixed amount of income go down. And that's terribly sad. And
well, can I say this? Grunch is about his gross universal cash heist.
Yes.
And it's about how the bankers steal. And that was your opening chapter.
Yeah.
So this is 30, 50 years ago. And this book,
he was a genius.
Yeah.
He was a genius. Yeah.
So when you say, I have a question. When you say the big print, my question is it still coming?
I think it is. I mean, it's interesting. And, so let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
We've really actually had 2 big prints. Okay. Well, even more if you go back far enough, but most notably in recent history, we had a very big print in 2008. The Fed balance sheet was 800 and some odd billion before, our former Fed chairman, Bernanke, decided that he could print money at will, as he said in his infamous speech. We have a printing press, and so they grew the balance sheet and the money supply by $3 trillion. And then, of course, that was just the first round. The second round was COVID, where they grew the balance sheet by another $5 trillion. The balance sheet's a proxy for the money supply. They're not directly linked, but they're close.
Wait, Lawrence, did you say in this book here that 40% of the money was printed during COVID?
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
40% of all the money in the U.S. was printed during a few years ago?
Yeah, the nation's 220 some odd years old, and they grew the money supply by 40%. And then the guy who was in charge of that growth, Powell, said inflation is transitory. And then when it became clear that it wasn't, and they printed, and they had a 9% annualized inflation rate at a conference, at an elite monetary conference in Jackson Hole, he joked and said, "Oh yeah, the good ship inflationary has sailed." He joked about it as though, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of sorry I screwed up, but no big deal." Right? Yeah. Well, fine, no big deal to him because he's worth $100 million. But how about the rest of us that have to struggle to get by? And it's absolutely criminal what these people have done to us. And my book lays that out chapter and verse. And as you know, I mean, I don't pull any punches. And I'm not going to make the New York Times bestseller list because I'm not socially in the club. I went to I'm not. I mean, as George said, it's a big club, and I'm not in it. I mean, I did go to Harvard Business School, but I'm not in the club, and I'm calling these folks out. But they need to be called out, and if we really want to return to a sound money standard, which I think is what will provide for fairness. I mean, the great problem that's occurred in this country is that the founding documents were absolutely perfect, and yet we've drifted away from them. And the notion was that, all men and women would be fair in front of the law. And in fact, that's not what's happened. That's just not true. The people who control the money supply, the people who are closest to the money printer, have an enormous advantage. And that's why the top 1% of this country owns 90% of the wealth.
Yeah. So I got to add this here. The very simple thing, this is a $5 bill. This is toilet paper as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. But when you print this, when it's printed and there's no production, and if they just print it, printing press, you and I, Lawrence and I, get richer.
Right.
But the poor and middle class gets poorer because what this causes inflation in assets like gold and silver and oil and cattle. But this also creates inflation in the supermarket, chicken, eggs, and milk. So the poor and middle class are getting poorer, and the rich, like you and I, are getting richer. So that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad 30 years ago. I said, you can't save this toilet paper. It's killing you. That's
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And the people who have access to cheap money and the people who are in a position to buy the assets, they're playing a game where the game board is tilted in their favor heavily.
It's called the Cantillon effect. As those who are, there's I should have saved it, but there's a line in here is that today we don't have capitalism. We have rugged capitalism for individuals. Rugged capitalism,
right?
But socialism for the rich and powerful.
It's so true. I mean, think about the 2008 example. Think about that example. I mean, my sister lost her house. Many people lost their jobs. There was widespread chaos associated with that bubble that they had blown to make up for the bubble that had burst in the .com stocks. And the bankers all got paid tons and tons of money. And, they should have failed. I mean, Lloyd Blankfein should be bankrupt, but instead he lives in a $60 million house on Long Island and holds forth on Twitter. And every time he does, I come back and counter him and say, "Shut up. You should be bankrupt."
That's exactly what he was saying. Gross universal cash heist.
Exactly. And so these people, they paid themselves $20 billion in bonuses after that bailout that saved them. So they were saved in a socialistic fashion.
Yeah. And
yet all the regular people, we faced rugged capitalism where we lost our houses and jobs, so it's tragic. And I think that, there are turning points in this country where you can just say, boy, we really went the wrong way. I mean, I think the Kennedy assassination was one. We don't need to go there now. But I think that, I think 2008 was another one where it became very clear that this was not a meritocracy and it was not a level playing field for all of us, that some people have unfair advantage over the rest of the people. And that's, that until we solve that, we can't live up to the promise, the great promise of America that was in the founding documents. So
when we come back, we're going into how, I always say, save yourself first. When you're in the airline, they say, well, put your life vest on first. You know what I mean? This book here is like a Jehovah's Witness. I bought a dozen. I'm handing out to all my friends. So you got to read this book. Had a book study this morning, and my friends, the guys in the study group, going, man, this is simple and clear. So we come back. We'll be going into what you can do, because every time they print this, the rich get richer, but the poor and middle class get poor. And my biggest concern, that's called civil unrest. We're pretty close to it.
That's right. That's a risk.
Yeah. So we're right back with Lawrence Lepard. And his book is called The Big Print. It's a great read. Not that it's simple, but it's well written. It's a big difference. It's well written. True. It makes a very complex subject clear. We'll be right back.
The U.S. dollar is dying, and most Americans are asleep. In 2025 alone, 11 countries have already dumped the dollar for trade. And China, they're not just talking. They're laying fiber optic cables under the Pacific to launch a digital currency system the world can use to cut America out. This is how empires fall, not overnight, but piece by piece. While average people sit on their couch watching the stock market and telling themselves it's going to be okay. It's not okay. We're buried under $36 trillion in debt. Moody's just slapped us with a credit downgrade. Inflation's still devouring your savings, and your 401k is just hanging by a thread in a rigged system. I've been saying this for years. Don't rely on job security. Don't trust Wall Street. Don't wait for permission. Think like an entrepreneur. Own real assets. Yes, I like gold. I own gold. But right now, silver is the play. Silver demand is exploding. Solar, EVs, military tech, water systems, it's everywhere. But supply drying up. And silver is still around $33 an ounce. I believe silver could hit $70 in 2025, maybe more. And if you want to wait around for CNBC to tell you that it's a good time to buy, it'll be too late. So here's what to do. Text silver to 24999. You'll get my 2025 Rich Dad's Guide to Silver for free. It breaks it all down. What's driving silver, why it's still cheap, and how to buy it smart before the next spike. Text silver to 24999 to claim your free guide right now. The average time to hire for most organizations is 30 to 45 days. Are you tired of the costly and lengthening hiring process? Simplify and speed up your recruitment by using the experts at Express Employment Professionals. Reduce time to hire, cut down on multiple interviews, and lower your recruitment costs. Whether you're looking for contract workers or new team members, our streamlined recruiting, candidate screening, and hiring process is more efficient than hiring on your own. Visit expresspros.com today. Haven't used a staffing company before? We know that you enjoy learning new things and keeping up with trends and efficiencies. Make a change this year with your hiring. Businesses are navigating a landscape that has never been more expensive or regulated. Start at expresspros.com to find the location near you. With more than 860 locally owned offices, you'll get the hiring support that you need at expresspros.com.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Today we have a very special guest, Lawrence Lepard. But most importantly, it's his book here. This is a must-read. It's called The Big Print, and I'm having my company study it right now. And I have a box of it. I hand it out to people like a Jehovah's Witness handling of the Bible. I said, you got to read this book because that's what's happening today. And like I said to most of you, I read this book years and years ago by Buckminster Fuller. The Grunch of Giants is how the bankers steal your money, how our wealth is stolen via our money. So if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it said the rich don't work for money, the rich don't save money. I drove people nuts. But this book explains why, because it's here today. Yeah. And Lawrence, I am honored to have you as my guest here.
As I said earlier,
well written.
It's an honor to be on your show. I mean, Rich Dad changed my life, and you're at the top of the list of educators in this area. So this is an honor for me.
well, we are going to do a lot of work together because this is our time. That's what I keep saying.
Well, that's the idea. I mean, I think, there are 300 million Americans. Sadly, as we discussed off camera, I don't think a lot of them understand what's coming. And
No.
and I know you've been trying very hard with all of your work to educate them. And I just am another voice joining the choir, I think, really. I mean, there have been a lot of other people carrying this torch, but I got to the point where I just couldn't stay silent anymore, and I had to write it down. So I did.
So I'm going to get you in. I'm going to China.
Yeah.
I'll get you invited to that. I'm also going on a real estate cruise, and that's like 10 days, and then you get to be immersed talking to people who will just eat. And there are people out there who are interested. 99% aren't, but that 1% are worth teaching.
Absolutely.
So your book is so timely, my friend.
Well, it is. I mean, I was rushing to try and get it out because I was afraid they might do the big print before I published it. Right? I mean, as we all know, in the financial system right now, for those of us who are paying careful attention, there are real cracks in the dam, and so and that's why I felt like I had to get it out. In fact, I self-published it on Amazon. I had a book agent who told me you could go with a big publisher, it'd take a year. I said, that's not, I can't do that. The time is too important. We got to just self-publish and get it out. Maybe a publisher will pick it up over time. But I really appreciate your recommending it and suggesting it. I mean, it's just a very important message. And I look around and like I say, this has been my life. I've spent 40 plus years as an investment manager studying investments, the monetary system, et cetera. Your book got me started. It's just a message. I mean, the average person is good, hardworking soul. They do their job, they do it well, and they don't think about what's the Federal Reserve, what's the monetary system. In fact, when I was first writing the book, my wife and I tested on my wife, I tested on some other people, and they came back to me, and their first question was, "What's the Federal Reserve?" And I thought, all right, well, I better explain that. So I really tried to bring it down to first principles of how this whole thing works and why it doesn't work for average people. Right. And I think that's the strong part of the book, if I do say so myself. I want average people to get mad. And the first part will get you mad because if you see the way they've been taking advantage of us all these years, it's hard not to be angry. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Right. Yeah. And then, but the second part is, okay, now that you've seen it, how do you protect yourself, right? And how do we all collectively fix it? Because this is not what America is supposed to be, broken the way it is.
So this is my whole point. Is that it's my friend Jim Rogers. He lives in Singapore.
Oh, I love Jim. Yeah.
He says history proves people don't learn from history.
That's right. Yeah.
But this is not the first. I mean, this has been going out throughout history. The Chinese were the first to print money. Then came the Germans and the Romans and English. They all print money.
Yeah. No, this is not something new. It reoccurs. No. But as investment managers, as Luke Groman says, you got to read history books. I mean, a lot of people are just kind of looking at the last 5 years and thinking, "Oh, the Mag 7's a good place to be. Look at my neighbor getting rich." But you've got to read longer term history books to understand these, fundamental issues.
Yeah. So let me tell you, my point of view, Lawrence, is that it's one thing to try and save the poor and middle class, but I hate to say it, I don't think they have a prayer because they don't get educated.
Well,
they send my family keeps sending their kids to school. I said, what do they learn? I don't know. Yeah. They learn how boys can beat girls in pole vaulting. I'm going, oh, God almighty.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is my question. Okay. So my point of view is this. Out of everything bad is something good.
Yes.
And I think right now is the best time to get rich.
Oh, absolutely.
It's never been easier.
I agree.
That's what I'm going. And so I'm one of these Bitcoin guys. You know what Bitcoin guys always say? I should have bought more.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, the asymmetry of where we are right now, I mean, this is a big thing that very few people, that's almost, high probability to happen, that very few people understand. I mean, it's, buying sound money right now, in my view, is like buying Amazon, in 2005. I mean, just, you can see where this is going to go.
Yeah.
And in 10 or 20 years, you're going to really notice a big difference between those who understood this and positioned themselves correctly and those who didn't, in terms of their financial outcome.
But you have this thing called crypto or Bitcoin right now. I look at it, I'm going, why isn't everybody on that thing? I mean, all you do is get 10th, whatever.
Yeah.
It's designed to make you rich.
It absolutely is. I mean, the notion of having a form of money that cannot be diluted, this has never occurred before in human existence, ever. It's something new. I mean, even gold, as sound and beautiful as it is, increases in supply by 1.7% a year. There are only 21 million Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. It is perfect sound money. And that's why it's been the best performing financial asset for the past 15, 16 years. And I said at a recent conference that I spoke at, I said, I can't wait until financial advisors start getting sued by their clients for, I know people who've gone to their financial advisor and said, hey, I hear about this Bitcoin thing. Maybe I should get some. And the financial advisor shits all over it. And, how can they do that? I mean, the financial advisor's job is to protect that person. And they're ignoring the financial asset that has the best performance of the past 16 years. And
Lawrence,
I'm like, what?
The reason they don't recommend it, they don't get a commission.
Well, exactly. That's obviously, that's the point, and that for the same reason, by the way, as you and I both know, that they don't recommend gold. Gold, if you look at gold's performance, as you pointed out in many cases in all your letters, if you look at gold's performance, it's beat lots of things, and it's held its value in terms of purchasing power. And yet go to a stockbroker and ask them about gold, and they'll sneer at you and say you're being a gold bug.
Well, that's why I started my own gold mine here.
Oh, did you?
So I took it public on New York Stock Exchange.
There you go.
That's real gold. It's green.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, but this is the point, Lawrence. It's never been easier to get rich.
I would agree with you.
To start this thing, it took brain power, took money. It took a lot of frickin' hard work. It took yelling and screaming and raising capital and doing dog and pony shows. Yeah. All you have to do is buy one frickin' Bitcoin and you got it made.
That's exactly right.
What's wrong with that picture?
That's exactly right. That's what's going to happen. I mean, Michael Saylor thinks that Bitcoin's going to 13 million a coin, and I agree with him. Now, that's going to take many, many, many years. But you can buy that coin today for $100,000. I mean, as you know, like in the gold mining business, as you point out, with any other company investment, even with Amazon, they had a management team that could have screwed it up. I mean, the mathematical protocol behind Bitcoin, has now been time tested for almost 900,000 blocks in 16 years. And I don't think it can get screwed up. I think we just sit back and watch it increase in value. So, if you're an artist or, you have a different craft, I mean, you don't have to suddenly have a financial advisor. You can just put your money in Bitcoin, forget about it, and know that every year you'll gain in value. It's kind of an amazing leveler of the financial system and the notion that average people can front run Wall Street and all these financial geniuses. I mean, I went to Harvard Business School and I've tried to interest them. I said, guys, this is the most revolutionary monetary development in the last 2,000 years. And, I know some of the students there and they've got a club and it's like 3 people. I sent it to the dean and he said, well, that's an interesting book, but I proposed that we have a debate about it up on stage, and they haven't followed up. They're not interested. And I'm like, you're missing it. You're just missing an enormous change. And it came from the grassroots. It came from just average people understanding what this is, and it's going to continue.
Yeah, the thing I like about Bitcoin is you don't have to be smart.
No,
you got to be smart to go to Harvard. And Trump.
I can debate that because I looked at some of my classmates. I may take the other side of that, but you got to be smart on paper to get in. Yeah.
But anyway. That's the whole thing. It's the greatest advantage I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and I'll
really
repeat it again because every Bitcoiner says the same words.
Yeah.
I should have bought more. Yeah. I bought a handful of coins in 2014, and I wish I'd bought more. And I kept buying, of course, but those were $300 a coin. Kind of looks cheap now. And to be fair, I mean, in 10 or 20 years, there are going to be people, our relatives and others, who are going to say, hang on a sec, you mean to tell me you got an entire Bitcoin? I mean,
think about it this way. Here's an interesting model. We think there are about 45, maybe 50 million people in the world who are millionaires. I think it might be higher than that. But there are only 21 million Bitcoin in the world, and some of them have been lost, and some of them are locked up, at MicroStrategy and so forth. And so every millionaire in the world can't even own one Bitcoin, right? I mean, they can own half a Bitcoin if we distribute them evenly. And by the way, they're not distributed evenly. So, you own one Bitcoin, you're almost guaranteed to be a millionaire as this whole thing unfolds. And I think you're going to be much more than that. So,
but you don't have to be smart.
No. Well, you've got to be willing to think outside of the box, and you've got to be smart enough not to sell. I mean, there'll be a lot of mistakes people will make, Robert. I mean, it'll go up, they'll double, and they'll think, oh, I got a profit, I got to take it. They'll be, hanging on to it and being patient. It's not simple.
No, I met my friends. They sold their Bitcoin to go take a vacation. I said, that's going to be the most expensive vacation you've ever taken.
Ever. I've met guys who were mining it on Apple II computer, basic Apple computers back in 10 and 11, and they had 10,000 Bitcoin. It got to $2. They were young kids and they needed a car, and they sold it all to buy a $20,000 car. And think about what 10,000 Bitcoin is worth today. You'd be a billionaire. I mean, it's just there's never been anything like this, and so people need to get their heads around it. And I will say the book, I think, does a nice job of doing that. I mean, the first part is all about the problem of how we're being screwed. But the second part really is quite hopeful, and it's the solution. And that part, too, I've tried to make it very easy. I mean, I used my wife as the reader test because she's not a financial person. She's a writer. And I said, do you understand this? And she said, yeah, I do, but you should make this simpler. You should, there's a chapter in there called Skepticism where I tried to point out that, this is a technological development, right? It's a new technology, digital immutable scarcity. And so I tried to point out, and I said, look, I mean, when cars came out, everyone thought they were dangerous. When electricity, there's a great cartoon in there. When electricity came out, everyone thought everyone was going to get electrocuted. But, imagine a world without electricity and cars, and so there's a lot of skepticism around this whole thing. But once you kind of peel back the layers, you realize that it's truly an invention that's important. And I think it represents the future of money. I mean, I've said many times, I think my children and grandchildren will price things in Satoshis, and the dollar will be kind of an ancient thing that, it'll be like the denarius, the Roman coin that was used in Rome. So, we'll just have to see. But I feel pretty strongly about it, and I've studied it for quite some time.
I want to say that we make we're an education system. We're not recommending it. I definitely make no commissions on selling.
No, neither do I. And everyone should consider their own situation, and nobody should put more in it than they can afford the volatility. Yeah. I mean, one thing I think some Bitcoiners, a mistake they make is just say, "Hey, take all your money and put it in this." No, that's not true, because it does go up and down a lot. It is volatile, and so when I'm talking to a friend and saying put some money in Bitcoin, I always say, be sure that what you put in there, you can live with a drawdown of 50%, because I've lived with 5 of those, and they're no fun. But I know it's, that they go to higher highs after each drawdown. And by the way, I've used the drawdowns to buy more. So,
I should have bought more.
Exactly. I mean, it was at 15,000 as recently as a few years ago, and I was buying more, but I didn't have anything else to sell to buy more with.
So anyway, we'll make no recommendations, but I just cannot believe how easy it's gotten for people to get rich. But that is the future. It's possible.
Yes,
it's possible.
Yes, but it requires if you casually buy it just based on somebody's recommendation, then it moves around. You're going to sell it. So you need to read my book, and you need to read some of the other books on it, like the Bitcoin Standard by Safe and others, to really deeply understand what we're talking about here. And then once you've seen it clearly, you'll come back with a conviction that, like, okay, I get it. My grandkids are going to inherit this, and they're going to be rich.
Yeah. So one last question I have for you before we go on. You mentioned in this book here, the big print, the fourth turning.
Yeah.
I thought that was a beautiful analysis. Like Jim Rogers says, history proves people don't learn from history. We've been here before.
Oh, we have. Yeah.
They've printed money before. When they printed money in Germany, Hitler came to power.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're there right now again. So what do you see relative to the fourth turning? What do you see with this?
Yeah. So fourth turnings occur. That's how Strauss wrote a book by that title. It suggests that every 80 to 100 years, all the rules of society change substantially. I think that's what's going on right now. I think our monetary system is going to change substantially. I think this fourth turning began in 2008 with the GFC, which was really a big crisis, financial crisis. These things typically last 10 to 30 years or 20 to 30 years. 20 years from '08 is 2028. That's 3 years from now. I don't think it'll be over by then. 2038 is 30 years. I don't think it'll take that long. I think in the next 10 years, the monetary system is going to substantially change, and that we're going to have the failure or severe inflation in fiat currencies, and the political backdrop is going to be that people are going to demand that we go back to the sound money standard that created America, which was the greatest nation in the world in 1946. In 1946, we were on the gold standard. We stood at the top of the world. And after that, things began to deteriorate. And, they deteriorated because we drifted away from first principles. First principle is sound money is important. And the book talks about that. I mean, in fact, there's a chapter in there that sound money is a moral issue, and I believe it is. It's written about in the Bible, honest weights and measures. I mean, sound money is written into our Constitution. Only gold and silver can be money. But what happened is that politicians, with their egos and their lust for power, have led us away from that basic principle. And in so doing, we're now in this big damn mess. And so what's got to happen is the honest remnant of this country, the God-fearing, hardworking, honest people that make this country run, have got to rise up. And we're going to do it. I mean, we are going to do it, Robert. I am absolutely convinced. But the only way we're going to do it is if we all read books like this and understand the issue clearly, so that we know who the enemy is and we know how to fight him to make things better. So that's my sales pitch.
So I gotta have you back on because we could go forever. But this is the book, it's the big print. But the reason I said is, has it happened yet? Because it happens throughout history. Right. And this is the point I'm bringing up. The story about them when the woman in Germany had a wheelbarrow full of money. Yes. And people get all enthused. Oh, a wheelbarrow full of money. And they think, but that wheelbarrow full of money was the cause of Adolf Hitler coming to power. That's exactly right. And that's the fourth turning. That's exactly right. It brings about some bad things in society, unfortunately. But we can short circuit that if we return to a sound monetary system. Yeah. And that's what guys like you and so many of us have been fighting for that for years. And I think we just have to spread that message. And I applaud the work you're doing and doing it. And somewhere along the line here, I decided to pick up my oar and start rowing. I'm trying to do the same thing. Well, we'll row together, my friend. We'll row together, exactly. So Lawrence, thanks very much. I've gone over time, and all the listeners out there, we'll have you back on. This is a subject. This is the creature from Jekyll Island. I study it like a wild man. Yeah. But that's what happens now. And remember, that wheelbarrow full of money led to Adolf Hitler. It was a bad thing. That's why I'm afraid of this title here. It's a very bad thing. Yeah, they're going to print a lot of money, and that's not a good thing. Thank you, Lawrence. And thank you very much, Robert. Really great to be with you. And we'll be right back for the final words. Thank you, Lawrence. Bye. Well, again, welcome back, and I'm going to thank Lawrence Lepard. Please get his book here, The Big Print, Lawrence Lepard, L-E-P-E-R-D. It's a great read, necessarily easy, but it makes a tough subject easy to understand. And so it's a very important book for your future. Like I said, it's the good news and bad news. The bad news is they're going to print trillions. The good news is you can get very rich too. So anyway, it's up to you. It's not that hard to do. Again, I want to thank Lawrence Lepard. I want to thank all of you for watching or listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show. Thank you. Bye.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.